Good evening, everybody. Fair and balanced. Let's try to be a little fair and balanced here today. A few hours ago, I posted a video talking about the possibility of the Seahawks carrying three quarterbacks on their roster in 2023. And I broke it down, I analyzed it, I looked at the past, I looked at the roster, I looked at all these different things, and my final assessment was I don't think it's likely. I don't. I think that there's a lot of reasons why this team won't carry three quarterbacks. They need the roster space. They typically don't. And they've shown a level of trust, or at the very least, interest in the two quarterbacks that they have. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. That doesn't mean it's impossible. And in the interest of trying to cover everything, I would be remiss to not, at the very least, objectively talk about the fact that it seems like there's interest in a particular quarterback in this upcoming draft. And look, smokescreen, it may be, misdirection, it may be, and even if it's not those things, that's no guarantee that it's going to happen. But right now, we're about 4 weeks away from the draft, a little less than 4 weeks. This is the main thing that the Seahawks are being talked about right now with regards to the draft. We have this article on screen from Corbin Smith, but there are other articles out there, there are tweets out there detailing the fact that the Seahawks seem to have latched on to Anthony Richardson as the quarterback that they are interested in. And honestly, even though I think it's unlikely, I still stand by that. I don't think we're going to carry three quarterbacks. If we were going to, this is the scenario that kind of makes some sense, right? Like, obviously the Seahawks are teasing interest in all the big quarterbacks in this draft. And I don't really buy it for the other three. I don't buy it for CJ Stroud because, well, mostly because he's not going to be there. No way. No way in the universe is he there at 5. I'm not buying it in Bryce Young, and I'm not buying it in Will Levis. It just doesn't really line up with the team after what they did with the Geno Smith contract. But this one, I think you can have a much more interesting conversation around. Anthony Richardson, you can at least discuss, I think. And you can have some very interesting conversations on whether or not that might actually be on the table. So, before I get into this, let me be very clear about something. Last year, going into the draft, there were two big storylines surrounding the Seahawks. Two things that the rumor mill believed that they would do. Two things that the rumor mill believed they would be in on. One was they loved Trevor Penning and wanted to take him at 9. And number 2 was they wanted to use their 2 second-round picks to trade back into the back end of the first round to draft a quarterback, either Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, or Matt Corral. Neither of those things came even close to happening. In fact, at the number 9 pick, the Seahawks took another offensive tackle that was not Trevor Penning, proving that they clearly didn't like him that much. And not only did they not trade up to draft one of those three quarterbacks, they passed all three of all three of those quarterbacks multiple times. So don't get me wrong here. If this is not your first rodeo, you know to not take this stuff as gospel. This is misdirection season. But I do want to talk about this because there is a little bit more going on here than there was with those players last year. This article goes into detail about how Schneider has spent extensive time with Anthony Richardson's agent in Gainesville, and Carroll has recently held a private meeting with Florida coach Billy Napier to continue digging on the quarterback. So there is a lot of smoke around this one, more smoke than there was last year. Last year it was more just, oh, this is the rumor, this is what is supposedly happening behind closed doors. Here you can actually see Schneider and Carroll spending time, valuable time, digging into Anthony Richardson. So I think that this needs to be considered for that reason. It's at least worth talking about for one video. And more than that, This is the scenario that I think actually makes sense if the Seahawks are going to spend a high pick on a quarterback. Not because I think he's the best quarterback. In fact, he's nowhere near close to the best quarterback, but the timeline lines up, the potential on a hit lines up, and it actually makes some degree of sense in a way that I don't believe the other quarterbacks make sense. So I don't need to really sell you guys on Anthony Richardson, I think. So in case I do, let me just remind you of the combine. This is basically his selling point right now. He had a historically great combine. Above average height, one of the heaviest quarterbacks in recent memory, one of the fastest. He's big, he's got big hands, pretty long arms. His vertical jumps and broad jumps were insane for a quarterback. Like, this is one of the greatest combines of all time. That is the selling point on Anthony Richardson right now. You are getting somebody who is historically talented. He's one of the heaviest quarterbacks to ever go through the combine and is also at the same time one of the fastest. He's an athlete unlike we've ever seen before at the quarterback position. His vertical jump and broad jump paints a picture of explosiveness that we have really just never seen before. So the upshot of Anthony Richardson is clear. He is a phenomenal talent. Arguably, honestly, maybe the most talented quarterback to ever go through the NFL Combine process. Obviously not the best, but I challenge you to find another quarterback who can compare to these measurables. And the reason why Anthony Richardson isn't the consensus number one overall pick is also pretty clear. You go to his numbers, he had one full season as a starter at Florida, and he completed less than 54% of his passes for less than 2,600 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Now, we should also throw his rushing stats in there as well. He had 650 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns, and I think he lost a couple fumbles. Nothing egregious over there, but those were his numbers. He was playing for a team that was not especially good. It was not like they made any kind of a national title run, and they didn't have an especially great offense. So we are dealing with somebody that is pure potential here. Now, you look at this, and you say, okay, well, first of all, you might say, wow, those stats are kind of not very good, and you'd be right. But more than even that, probably, is the lack of experience. Before last year, Anthony Richardson had thrown 66 passes at the college level. He was basically completely new. He had basically done nothing but collect splinters in his butt for 2 years. And then he gets one full year as a starter where the results are mixed. And then he's going up to the pros. And then he's headed off to the pros. So you look at this, and here's the thing. You look at C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, even though they're still young, they're still 21, 22 years old when the season starts, they played really well in college at big-time programs and seem ready for the pro game. If not immediately, then within that first year. You look at Will Levis, you won't see amazing performances at college, but you will see a pro-ready quarterback who is already 24 years old. He's ready to go. You look at this and you say, this is a guy who's going to need some serious time. And people are going to try to draw the comparison to Josh Allen. They're going to say, oh, well, Josh Allen is basically the 5 years ago what Anthony Richardson is now, so it should be the same thing. It's really not. Josh Allen had 2 full years as a starter in college, and his results, at least in 2016, were a good deal better than anything Richardson did. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. Josh Allen had twice the level of experience and much better results than Anthony Richardson in college. So Anthony Richardson, you might be looking at a guy who needs to sit for 2 years. You remember Trey Lance? When Trey Lance came out, he had already been sitting out for a year because of COVID. He had only 1 full year of college football production. And the smart people said, you got to give him until year 3 before you really expect anything. Same thing here. Same thing with Anthony Richardson. Now, what happens in 2 years? What happens over the next 2 years? You've got Geno Smith. You just brought him back on a contract extension. Obviously, he will be here in 2023. 10 million cap hit. Obviously not going anywhere. You're certainly not going to release him now. That's insanity. That's not even on the table. 2024. Assuming Geno gives you a good year, you've got him at a reasonable cost, $31.2 million. Yeah, you could release him if you wanted to and save a good amount of money. You save almost half of the cap hit. But more than likely, if he plays well in 2023, you're going to want to keep him around. And then what happens that next year? It's year number 3 for Anthony Richardson. Now maybe he's ready. Now maybe he's ready to go, okay, put me in. I can play NFL football now. I needed those 2 years to learn under a veteran. I needed those 2 years to figure out how to do the little things that quarterbacks need to do. But I'm ready now. Now you got Geno Smith on the last year of a deal. You let him go, it's less than $9 million dead. It's probably going to happen regardless. Even if Geno plays really well the next couple of years, you are probably still looking at a scenario where you let him go because financially it might be required at that point. So the timeline lines up here. I don't know why you would bring Geno Smith back on this contract only to have a top rookie breathing down his neck by the end of year 1 or by the start of year 2. So the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis stuff doesn't make sense to me anymore. This, however, with Anthony Richardson, who is going to need at least 1, but more likely 2 years to learn, it actually starts to make sense. So I believe there might be some interest. Okay, so that kind of breaks down the logistics of it and why it actually is a good match. Anthony Richardson needs time that a lot of teams will not give him. If the Carolina Panthers draft him, they're probably going to try to have him play year 1 because they don't have a quarterback right now. If he goes to a team like the Colts, they're probably going to want him to play year 1 because they don't have anybody. And it's not going to work very well. You go down the list, all these teams that don't have a quarterback right now, you're going to have to find the teams that do. Like if he goes to a team like, just as an example, the Raiders, that might work because they just got Jimmy Garoppolo. But most of the teams that would consider taking a quarterback with a top pick, they're going to look at this and go, yeah, we need somebody who's going to be ready by at the latest year 2, but more than likely at some point in year 1. And that's probably going to result in disaster with Anthony Richardson. The Seahawks, one of the few teams in the league that could take a quarterback and would be able to give them those 2 years. By the way, that's one of the reasons why you carry 3 quarterbacks. If Geno Smith gets hurt, okay, you still don't have to put Anthony Richardson in. You don't have to cost yourself the development that you're trying to slowly bring along in him. You put Drew Lock out there. He's ready to go. So it works on that level too. You don't even need Anthony Richardson to be active on game day. He can just be a backup. He can just sit there knowing that he's not going to have to play at all, and he's got time. All right, so I'll say this. Makes a lot of sense to me that John Schneider would really like Anthony Richardson. He might be really enamored with Anthony Richardson. I don't know why Carroll would want Anthony Richardson. To me, Anthony Richardson kind of stands for everything that Carroll doesn't want in a quarterback. Because as of right now anyway, and obviously he's going to develop, he's going to change, you hope he gets better. He's a guy who isn't very accurate, tries to, he tries to be a one-man show, which is he's not going to play within a system, and he's a kind of a turnover guy right now. Not huge turnover numbers, but I guarantee you if you try to put him in an NFL game right now, he will be. So I'm actually kind of surprised if Carroll really likes Anthony Richardson, but maybe he does. Maybe he does. So I'm not saying this is the most likely pick. I still think that the leaning of the Seahawks right now is to go get a defensive player. But this makes sense. When I hear this, I don't think immediately it must be a smokescreen. It could be a smokescreen, but I'm not sitting here like I am with Stroud, Young, Levis, just thinking to myself, oh yeah, that's a smokescreen all day. I'm not falling for that. Now this I could see at least being a possibility. All right, let me know what you guys think. Go Hawks and fair and balanced.